There's a conversation happening in almost every home in America right now, and it never actually happens out loud. Money gets mentioned in passing, bills get paid in silence, questions get swallowed before they're ever asked. You'll see in this video why talking about money feels almost impossible for so many people, even with the people they love most, not because they don't care, not because they're hiding something shameful, but because somewhere along the way, money became the one topic everyone agreed, without ever discussing it, not to discuss. Think about your own life for a moment. Do you actually know how much your parents earned growing up? Do you know what they struggled with financially? Did anyone in your family ever sit down and explain how much things cost, how debt worked, what happens if the money runs out? For most people, the honest answer is no. Money was something adults whispered about behind closed doors, something that caused tension at the dinner table but was never actually named. And here's what's strange about that. We'll talk about almost anything else: relationships, health problems, even deeply personal struggles. Those conversations happen eventually, however uncomfortable they are. But money stays sealed shut. Married couples sometimes go years without fully knowing each other's debt. Adult children have no idea what their aging parents have saved or haven't. Close friends will talk about anything except what they actually earn, what they actually owe, what actually keeps them up at night financially. It's a strange kind of exception when you really look at it. One topic carved out from everything else, treated as too dangerous to touch directly, even among people who trust each other completely in every other area of life. So here's the real question worth sitting with. What is that silence actually costing us? Because silence isn't neutral. It's not just an absence of conversation. It's a decision made over and over without anyone consciously choosing it. And decisions, even silent ones, have consequences that compound over time. Stay with me until the end, because understanding why this silence exists is the first step toward finally breaking it. To understand why this silence exists, we need to look at where it actually comes from, because nobody is born uncomfortable talking about money. Watch a young child and you'll notice something interesting. They'll ask loudly in the middle of a crowded store, "How much does that cost? Are we rich? Why doesn't that man have a house?" Kids ask these questions without any hesitation because they haven't learned yet that they're not supposed to. That lesson comes later, and it comes from watching the adults around them. A parent shushing a child who asked how much the neighbor's car cost, a tense silence that falls over the room when a bill arrives, a quick change of subject whenever money comes up at a family gathering. Children don't need to be told directly. We don't talk about money in this family. They absorb it, through tone, through body language, through the topics that consistently get avoided. And once that lesson is learned, it tends to stick for life. There's a cultural layer to this too, worth naming directly. In many households, money became tangled up with something even more sensitive: self-worth. Earning a certain amount became proof that you were doing well. Struggling financially became something to hide, almost like a personal failure that needed to stay private at any cost. So silence became a form of protection. If nobody knows how much you struggle, nobody can judge you for it. If nobody knows how much you actually have, nobody can ask you for it, envy you for it, or use it against you. That protection made a certain kind of sense, at least on the surface, but protection has a cost, and that cost gets paid quietly over decades by entire families who never learned any other way to handle the subject. Think about how this shows up in relationships specifically. Two people fall in love. They talk about their past, their fears, their dreams for the future, sometimes even their most private insecurities. But how much do they actually know about each other's relationship with money before they combine their finances completely? How many couples get married without ever having a real conversation about debt, about spending habits, about what financial security even means to each of them individually? Not because they're avoiding each other, but because neither of them ever learned that this conversation was even supposed to happen. It wasn't modeled for them. so it doesn't occur to them that it's missing. That's the origin of this silence. Not one dramatic event, but a quiet inheritance, passed down, generation after generation, family after family, without anyone ever deciding it should be that way. There's a version of this that plays out between friends too, worth mentioning briefly. Two close friends can go on vacation together, celebrate milestones together, support each other through genuine hardship, and still never once discuss what either of them actually earns, saves, or worries about financially. That gap often feels strange when someone actually notices it. How is it possible to know someone's deepest fears, but not their salary, not their debt, not whether they're actually doing okay? The answer is the same inherited discomfort, simply showing up in a different relationship. Friendship doesn't automatically override a lesson learned in childhood, reinforced for decades. So if this silence gets passed down through families, why does it still feel so normal today, in a world that's changed so much in almost every other way? That's worth digging into, because the answer isn't just about individual families. Society itself reinforced this silence in ways most people never noticed. Think about how money is portrayed almost everywhere. In movies, wealth is either something glamorous and effortless or something shameful and desperate. There's rarely an honest middle ground shown, rarely a normal family having a normal, calm conversation about a budget. Because that doesn't make for compelling entertainment. So an entire generation grew up seeing money either celebrated or hidden, but almost never simply discussed. Add to that something specific to certain generations, the idea that discussing your income, your salary, your net worth was simply impolite. Never ask someone what they earn. It's rude to talk about money. These weren't just casual suggestions. They were treated as firm social rules, taught alongside table manners and please and thank you. And in some ways, that rule made sense. Nobody wants every conversation reduced to comparing bank balances. But somewhere along the way, that specific rule quietly expanded into something much broader. Not talking about how much you earn slowly became not talking about money at all. Not comparing incomes became not admitting struggle, not asking for help, not learning from each other's mistakes. The workplace made this worse in its own way. Many companies for decades actively discouraged employees from discussing their salaries with each other. Sometimes this was even written into policy, though often it's not actually enforceable by law. The reasoning given was usually about maintaining a professional, harmonious environment, but consider who that silence actually benefits. When employees don't know what their colleagues earn, they lose one of their most powerful tools for negotiating fair pay. Silence in that context wasn't protecting harmony, it was protecting a system where information imbalance worked against the person with less power in the room. Now bring this back to the personal level, inside families and relationships. Every uncomfortable money conversation that got avoided, every question that went unasked because it felt too personal, too rude, too risky, added another layer to a silence that was already generations deep. Nobody sat down and designed this system. It emerged slowly from 1,000 small moments where silence felt safer than honesty. And once enough of those moments accumulate, across enough families, across enough years, silence starts to feel like the default, like something natural rather than something learned. But here's what's easy to forget. Just because something feels natural doesn't mean it's actually serving us well. There's a more recent layer worth mentioning too, one that didn't exist for previous generations in quite the same way. Social media changed how money gets discussed without actually making it more honest. People now see curated glimpses of other people's financial lives constantly, the vacations, the new car, the renovated kitchen, but almost never the debt behind it, the stress behind it, the actual numbers behind it. So the silence didn't disappear in the digital age, it just changed shape. Everyone performs financial success in small, careful doses, while the real conversation, the honest one, stays exactly as hidden as it always was. If anything, this makes the silence heavier, because now people aren't just comparing themselves to a vague sense of how others are doing, they're comparing themselves to a highlight reel, assuming everyone else has this figured out except them. That assumption is almost always wrong, but there's no way to know that as long as the real conversation keeps staying silent. If you ask most people why they avoid talking about money, they'll usually say something like, "It's just personal," or "It feels awkward." And that's true on the surface. But here's the mistake underneath that reasoning: treating silence as if it's a neutral, harmless choice. Because silence isn't harmless, it's a decision that carries real consequences. They just tend to arrive slowly, quietly, so they're rarely connected back to the original choice to stay silent in the first place. Consider what happens inside a marriage where money is never fully discussed. One partner might be quietly drowning in credit card debt, while the other assumes everything is fine because nobody ever said otherwise. One partner might be saving aggressively for a goal, while the other has completely different expectations for retirement, for lifestyle, for what financial security even means. These gaps don't cause problems immediately. They sit there, unnoticed, sometimes for years, until a crisis forces the conversation that should have happened long before: a job loss, a medical emergency, a sudden realization that retirement is closer than the savings account suggests. By the time the silence breaks, it often breaks under pressure in the middle of a crisis, instead of calmly, on their own terms, years earlier when there was still time to adjust course together. The same mistake plays out between parents and adult children. Aging parents often keep their financial situation completely private, not because they're trying to deceive anyone, but because admitting struggle or even just being transparent about numbers feels uncomfortable, even shameful. So their adult children have no real picture, no idea if there's a plan for long-term care, no idea if there's debt hiding behind a comfortable-looking lifestyle, no idea what they might eventually need to help with or plan for. Then a health crisis happens, and suddenly everyone is trying to piece together financial information under the worst possible circumstances, stressed, grieving, and completely unprepared. Here's the deeper mistake underneath all of these examples: believing that avoiding the conversation protects the relationship, when usually the opposite is true. What actually damages relationships isn't honest financial conversation. It's the resentment, confusion, and crisis that builds up in its absence. Couples who never discuss money openly don't avoid conflict. They simply delay it, and often make it worse, because by the time it surfaces, trust has already been quietly eroded by everything left unsaid. There's one more layer to this mistake worth naming clearly. Silence doesn't just hide problems from other people, it often hides them from ourselves too. Someone who never speaks their financial fears out loud never has to fully confront them either. The debt stays a vague, uncomfortable feeling instead of an actual number with an actual plan attached to it. Speaking something out loud makes it real enough to actually address. And that discomfort, the fear of making it real, is often the true reason the silence continues, far more than any concern about being impolite or oversharing. There's one final cost worth naming because it's easy to overlook entirely. Chronic financial silence tends to produce a very specific kind of quiet anxiety, a low hum of stress that never fully goes away because it never gets addressed directly. People carrying this kind of silence often describe feeling like something is wrong without being able to name exactly what. They sleep a little worse. They avoid opening certain apps, certain envelopes, certain conversations without consciously deciding to. That anxiety doesn't stay contained to finances either. It tends to leak into everything else: patience with a partner, energy for parenting, focus at work. And because the root cause is never spoken out loud, it becomes strangely difficult to trace back to its actual source. People often blame stress on work, on general life pressure, without ever connecting it to the one conversation they've been avoiding for years. That's the real compounding cost of this mistake. Not just missed information, but a background weight that quietly follows people through everyday life, never resolved because it's never named. So here it is. The part most people never stop to consider: if silence around money is inherited, learned, and reinforced by nearly everything around us, how does anyone actually break out of it? The answer isn't dramatic. It doesn't require some perfect scripted conversation or a special moment where everything suddenly feels comfortable. It starts with something much smaller. One honest sentence spoken out loud before the silence has a chance to close back in. The people who eventually break this pattern aren't necessarily more confident or naturally better communicators. What they have usually is a moment where they decided the discomfort of speaking was worth less than the cost of staying quiet. Sometimes that moment is small, a partner finally saying, "I think we need to actually look at our finances together, not just assume it's fine." Sometimes it's bigger. An adult child finally asking a parent directly, "Do you have a plan for this? And is there anything I should know?" These moments feel enormous beforehand and strangely simple once they've actually happened. Here's something almost nobody tells you about these conversations: they rarely go as badly as the anticipation suggests. The fear beforehand is almost always worse than the conversation itself. Because in the silence, imagination fills in the worst possible reactions: anger, judgment, conflict. But when the words are actually spoken, calmly and honestly, most people respond with relief, not rejection, because chances are they were carrying their own version of that same silence too. There's a specific shift that tends to happen once families or couples start having these conversations regularly. Money stops being a source of hidden tension and starts becoming simply information, numbers to work with, plans to make, decisions to face together instead of separately and in secret. That shift changes everything downstream. Couples who talk openly about money tend to make bigger financial decisions together, with fewer surprises and less resentment. Children who grow up hearing calm, honest conversations about money absorb something completely different than the generation before them. They learn that money is something to be discussed, not feared into silence. And here's what's easy to miss about breaking this pattern: it doesn't require perfect financial knowledge first. You don't need to have all the answers before you're allowed to start the conversation. Some of the most important money conversations begin with, "I don't actually know how to think about this. Can we figure it out together?" That kind of honesty is worth more than a polished, confident script that avoids the real discomfort underneath. Breaking the silence isn't about becoming a financial expert overnight. It's about deciding once to say the uncomfortable thing out loud, and then choosing again and again to keep the conversation open instead of letting it seal shut once more. Let me tell you about two couples. We'll call them the Coles and the Bennetts. Both couples got married around the same time. Both started out with similar incomes, similar debt, similar hopes for the life they were building together. On paper, they were remarkably alike. The Coles, like most couples, never really sat down to talk about money in any structured way. They split some bills, kept some accounts separate, and generally assumed things were fine because nothing dramatic had happened to suggest otherwise. Money came up, occasionally, usually as a quick, tense exchange when a bill was higher than expected, or when one of them made a purchase the other hadn't known about. Neither of them enjoyed those moments, so understandably they avoided creating more of them. The Bennetts started out almost identically uncomfortable with the topic, but early in their marriage, something shifted. They'd both grown up in households where money was a source of quiet stress, and neither of them wanted to repeat that pattern. So they made an agreement. Once a month, they'd sit down, just the two of them, and go through their finances together. Not a lecture, not a confrontation, just an honest look at what was coming in, what was going out, and what they were working toward. At first, it felt almost artificial. Sitting down on purpose to talk about something they'd both grown up avoiding felt stiff, even a little silly. But they kept the appointment anyway, treating it the way they'd treat any other commitment they'd made to each other. The first few conversations were awkward, genuinely uncomfortable at times. There were disagreements, different instincts about spending and saving that had to be talked through, not just assumed away. But something happened after a few months. The awkwardness started to fade. It became simply part of how they operated as a couple. 10 years later, the difference between these two households wasn't really about who earned more or who made smarter individual choices. The Coles found themselves in a difficult spot. A medical bill arrived that neither of them had planned for, and in trying to figure out how to handle it, they discovered debt on a credit card neither had fully disclosed to the other. It wasn't malicious. It had simply accumulated quietly in the space where honest conversation should have been happening all along. The conversation that followed was painful, not just about the debt itself, but about years of assumptions that had never been checked. The Bennetts, meanwhile, faced their own version of a financial shock that same year, a job loss, unexpected and stressful. But because they'd spent a decade building the habit of talking openly, they faced it together immediately, with a shared, accurate picture of exactly where they stood. They adjusted their plan within weeks, not months of confusion and hidden resentment. Yet, here's what's important to understand about these two stories. The Bennetts weren't naturally better communicators. They didn't start out more comfortable with money conversations than the Coles did. They simply made a decision early on to have the uncomfortable conversation on purpose, regularly before a crisis forced it. That single habit, repeated monthly for years, became the entire difference between facing hardship together and discovering it had been hiding in silence all along. So if you saw a little of the Coles in your own relationships, here's the good news. Breaking this silence doesn't require a dramatic overhaul. It requires a decision and then a habit, built one honest conversation at a time. Let's walk through what that actually looks like. The first step is picking a moment that isn't already tense. Don't wait for a crisis or a bill you can't explain to have your first real money conversation. Choose a calm evening, a quiet weekend, a moment with no pressure attached to it. The goal of the first conversation isn't to solve everything, it's simply to open the door. The second step is asking questions instead of making statements. How do you feel about where we are financially? Opens a conversation. You're spending too much. Closes one before it even starts. The same applies with parents, with adult children, with anyone you're trying to have this conversation with for the first time. Curiosity invites honesty. Accusation invites defense. The third step is normalizing the discomfort instead of avoiding it. You can say it out loud. This feels a little awkward to bring up, but I think it's important. Naming the discomfort often dissolves some of its power. It reminds both people that this is simply unfamiliar territory, not a sign that something is wrong. The fourth step is making it a habit, not a one-time event. Like the Bennetts, pick a regular rhythm, monthly or even quarterly. A recurring check-in turns money from a rare, loaded topic into simply part of how you communicate. The fifth step is extending this beyond your immediate household. If you have aging parents, find a gentle way to ask about their plans, their wishes, whether there's anything you should know before it becomes urgent. If you have children, let them witness age-appropriate versions of these conversations instead of shielding them from the topic entirely. You're not just solving a problem for today, you're changing what gets passed down to the next generation. The sixth step is accepting that some of these conversations will feel imperfect, even a little clumsy. That's fine. The goal was never a perfectly smooth conversation. The goal is simply an honest one. The seventh step is writing things down instead of relying only on memory. A shared document, a simple spreadsheet, even a notebook kept somewhere accessible, turns vague impressions into concrete facts both people can look at together. This removes some of the emotional charge from the conversation too. It's easier to look at a number on a page together than to rely purely on verbal recollection during an already tense moment. None of these steps require special financial expertise. None of them require the silence to have already been broken by someone else first. They simply require you to speak the first uncomfortable sentence and then keep the door open after that. If this video helped you see your own relationship with money a little more clearly, that's exactly why this channel exists. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the conversations still to come. Somewhere right now, a couple is lying in bed, both awake, both thinking about money, and neither one saying a word about it out loud, and somewhere else, an adult child is wondering about their aging parents' finances, but keeps deciding tonight isn't the right night to ask. These moments happen constantly, quietly, in homes that look from the outside completely fine. They're not fine because the silence is working. They're fine because nobody has yet discovered what the silence has been hiding. But here's what matters more than how this silence started. You're not required to inherit it. The habit of staying quiet may have been passed down to you, but it doesn't have to be passed down any further. Every couple who eventually learned to talk openly about money started exactly where you might be starting: uncomfortable, unsure of the right words, wondering if it was even worth bringing up. Think about the Coles and the Bennetts one more time. Same starting point, same discomfort at the very beginning. Neither couple had any special training for this. Neither of them found it natural at first. The only thing that separated where they ended up was the decision, made early and repeated often, to speak instead of stay quiet. That decision is available to you too. Not someday when it feels easier. Today, in whatever small, imperfect way you can manage it. The only real difference between carrying this silence forward and finally setting it down is choosing to say the first honest sentence out loud. So the real question isn't whether talking about money is uncomfortable. It's what you're willing to say, despite the discomfort, before silence makes that choice for you. Here at The Bigger Picture, we'll always explore the financial questions that truly matter, not with fear, not with sensational headlines, but with honest conversations, clear explanations, and the bigger picture behind every story